Now today's our lab. I want to talk about the lab now. This is the disk operating system is the focus of our lab. Besides installing Windows XP on our computer, we're also going to look at some of the features of the disk operating system. The disk operating system is actually still part of Windows today. It hides inside, or at least the functions of it are still there. But the original disk operating system was basically just that. It only took care of the file system. It didn't do a whole lot else. It didn't provide much of a user interface. It did have a command line, text line, and that was about it for opening programs and commands. It couldn't do multitasking and multiprocessing, but primarily what it did do is provide a file system, and that file system is pretty much like what we use today. It had three parts of it that it used to do this. It had three files that were on your floppy disk, because it was designed to load off a floppy disk. The kernel was called ms-dos.sys, the kernel of the operating system. It had an io.sys, which is basically the driver's input-output system, and it had a command.com, which was the interpreter. When you typed commands into the command prompt, the command.com was what figured out what you were typing and would then cause programs to execute, or it would either do it for you, or it would cause another program to start running to do the task for you. There were two kinds of commands that command.com understood. Internal commands would be commands that it knew what to do with, simple commands that were well, the ones that were the most common. And then the external commands would be things that it didn't know how to do, and it would cause another program to run to do these external commands. Here's some examples of some internal commands that command.com knew how to run. It could give you a directory of the files on your hard disk, or a folder, or directory or subdirectory. A directory is just another name for folder, and subdirectory would be the same as a subfolder, or folder within a folder. It could delete files, copy files, rename files, stuff you'd expect, pretty basic stuff that you have to be able to do to manipulate files. And these aren't only ones it could do. It could do quite a few others as well. Time and date, stuff like that. External commands would be things that command.com didn't know how to do itself. It wasn't capable, and so it would start up another program to do it. So like maybe you wanted to check to make sure your disk drive was working okay. There was a program called check disk. Or maybe you wanted to edit a file. Edit is a program, and you type edit in and it would run it. In fact, we still have in Windows, if I go to I'm going to go to the command prompt today, like we're going to do in our lab. This is the command prompt. You click Programs, Command Prompt is one way to get to it. If that's on there, it may not be on there. That's recently run programs. The way you can always get to it, though, is go to Programs, Accessories, and then Command Prompt. It should be in the menu there. Or you can go click Run and type in CMD command. I'll do it that way. So there's my command prompt. And edit, for example, is an external program. If I type edit in here, you see it runs a little editor called edit. That's a DOS program. It doesn't have a very fancy interface to it. It does know how to use a mouse, but that's, but it's like a little text editor there that I can type stuff into, type into something, and it's like a little word processor sort of, but it doesn't have anything but just basic features. Editing only ASCII codes. ASCII text, meaning it doesn't have any formatting, it doesn't have any fonts, it doesn't know how to deal with paragraphs and things like, it doesn't have a spell checker, it's real basic. But that's an external command. If you wanted to format a disk, that would be an external command. If you wanted to print a file, that was an external command. All those things would be run as programs. In fact, any program that you run would be an external command. I'll show you an example of one here. if I go back here to the Windows, I could type in the command Explorer. All right, we use that in Windows all the time. But if I type it into DOS, it runs it, because it's just a program. So when we click on a folder to open it up, what we're really doing is causing the operating system to run Explorer for us. When the operating system starts up, it has to get loaded off of something. And usually that's the hard drive. In the early days of the PC, though, that was a floppy disk, because the operating system could fit on a floppy disk. It can't fit on a floppy disk anymore. But you can still build a bootable floppy disk if you have a floppy drive, and you can put a version of Windows on it, or a DOS, actually, a version of DOS that came with Windows. And but when they got up to Windows XP and Windows Vista and Windows 7, they were too big to fit on floppy disks anymore. Now, but you can put them on flash drives. There's a way you can make a flash drive bootable, so because they can hold a lot more than a floppy disk. And when you do that, you can boot the operating system off of that. And that's useful sometimes when things go wrong. If something goes wrong with the hard drive, you can use a bootable media like this to start up an operating system to get the computer running, so you can make changes or to repair things. So it's very useful to have a bootable media. To make a bootable floppy disk, there's a command called format, which was used to format the floppy disk. If you type format A:, which is the name of the floppy disk drive, and then /s, that would make it into a bootable disk, which made it so that you could boot up the operating system off the floppy instead of off the hard drive. Format A:/s made it a system disk, or a bootable system disk. I mentioned about the names of files in DOS. DOS originally only had 8-character names. So it was like the biggest name you could have would be like autoexec.bat. It had 8 characters followed by a 3-letter extension. And that was it. So if you wanted to save a file, you had to come up with a name that would fit in 8 letters followed by 3 letters. And the 3 letters was reserved for the file type, or the extension, which tells you what kind of file it is. So like this one's a text file. It was a Word text editor would work with that, like Edit would work with that, or Notepad. Autoexec.bat is a batch file, meaning it's a program that runs other commands. It runs a series of commands. Config.sys is a configuration file. System, SYS, means it's part of the operating system. So you would be careful about changing that file, probably. There are many extensions for different types of files. Here's just a list of some common ones. For example, here's one for graphics, bitmap, or COM, which is a command file, or a program, a small program. A DLL is a part of a program, a linked part that's linked together with other parts to make a bigger program. A document file is a word processor. EXE file is a program file, an executable program file. So you could just type its name and it would run under the DOS prompt. An INI file has configuration information in it to initialize something. A log file records what happened while the operating system was running, or some program was running. It would record things in a log file. And we mentioned a text file before. Those are just some examples of extensions. There's many more. And it's from these extensions that the operating system knows what kind of file it is. And if you have it in the graphical user interface and you click on it, the operating system knows what kind of program to run to open that file based on that. So if, for example, if you clicked on a program that had a .com or .exe extension, it would know that that's a program that needs to run itself. But if you, let's say, clicked on a text file, it would know enough to just open that up with a word processor for it, or a text editor for you. If you clicked on a .doc file, it would know that that's a word processor file and to open up the word processor.